story of what you all do, have done, and the geography of where you are is, to me, one of Pensacola's most unique tales that, unfortunately, it doesn't get a telling all that often. By the way, I brought along something for you tonight. This is, I don't know whether you have a library. If you do, this is yours. This is a reprint that just came out this last week. The title of it is Historic Buildings of Pensacola. It deals with things that you involve your area, but also many of the classic buildings that either were a part of our heritage here or unfortunately are gone. But anyway, here is your copy, and I'll just give it to you here so we don't lose it all. Right. Well, let me start our story back in the year 1870. If we had lived in Pensacola at that time, we were just about to turn the corner into prosperity. This were 5 years past the end of the War of Northern Aggression, and the community, this whole community is struggling. The people were trying to rebuild their lives, but they had been, the community had been down to a grand total of 75 residents once the total population fled. And that's the way it was for a little more than 3 years. People trickled back, rebuilt themselves. They were too poor to pay, didn't have the wherewithal to whitewash. They just tried to put things back together. And then in 1870, something wonderful happened. In Europe, they began the rebuilding of industrial cities based upon the experience that they had there in the Franco-Prussian War. There was a great need for lumber. And just by great happenchance, this area was sitting on the best known available source of timber for conversion into building lumber. And within a matter of months, mills began to open, orders began to flood in, and so by the time we reached 1875, people were beginning to make money. In addition to that, our railroad had been rebuilt to the north, and an ice plant had been built here. And as a result, you were putting ice and railroads together with the availability of deep sea fishing, and we were beginning to create a wonderful commercial fishing industry that lasted here for almost 100 years. At the same time, of course, we began to have a need for moving this lumber to Europe. And that brought in whole fleets of sailing vessels. They were small, but they came here in great numbers. And in an average month, we were getting between 50 and 60 additional ships down here. They had to be treated before they went back, and that meant that they had to have the naval stores to fill the cracks in the bottom. So a whole new industry there began. An industry, when we mentioned naval stores today, people say, well, that was five and dime store thing. The naval stores industry, by the time we reached 1880, was as large as the combined manufacturing of all sources here that we have enjoyed in Pensacola at the height back in the late 1960s. You get an idea, you had thousands of people working that way. So people were getting jobs, people men with experience were flooding in, mills were opening, and so people began to make money. By the time you reached the late 1870s, I can remember your great-grandfather here. He was rubbing his hands together because he was saying, we've got to get out of that little house that we've had down near the water, the old-fashioned place, the little shotgun house. Let's use our money. We can't, bear in mind now, we can't buy a new Cadillac. We can't go to Europe on the Concorde. What are we going to do with our money? Well, let's build a nice house. And so the idea was, how do we go about this? Where do we do it? Well, the logical place that they staked out for this, of course, was the territory, the area that you all are so familiar with. And so beginning in the year 1878, 79, people began to buy properties up there to build the first of these houses. Now, remember that at this time, we had three prominent building contractors here. Frank Crona, A.V. Alexander Clubs, and then in addition to that, of course, was Charlie Turner. Those three were the big ones, and you had just really one prominent architect. His name was Charles Overman. And Overman, between all the putting them all together, people began to turn to these men, saying, "All right, we want to build." Now I have to tell you a story about how that developed. People today say, "Well, times really haven't changed so much," because basically, at the time we're talking about, the late 70s, what we would today call the family magazines had become available down here. This is the Southern living of the 1870s, if you will. These magazines were being done in Philadelphia and Boston and Newport, and as a result of that, people here who were interested in building a house began to subscribe. And I can remember your family did it just this way. You would, month after month, you would get your magazine, you'd page your way through it, and you'd finally say, that would be nice. Tear out that page, let's collect it. And week after week, month after month, you would do this. So by the time you got ready to really seriously build, you would sit down, let's say, with Charlie Turner. You have all these little pieces there, and you say, "Now, Charlie, we have bought this beautiful lot now, with beautiful trees on it and so forth, up on North Spring Street. And we expect, by the time our family is completed, we probably are going to have 6 or 7 children before we're through. So we've got a plan for that. And Charlie, we made all these, we got all these ideas. We want you to go ahead and put together a plan for us with a rendering if you can do it. Let us see what you have in mind." So Charlie went back, and after a couple of weeks, we got back together again at a showroom. And he looked at you thought that, "Oh, this was just fine." Now, Charlie, now one thing we want to be sure of now, as we build this, we want to be sure, and I think you've indicated down here that on the south side and a little bit on the east side, that you have a room for a good-sized veranda. We want to be sure that veranda is there, because it gets hot here in the summertime. We want to be sure we can take it. Oh, and on the south side particularly, it'll probably stretch the budget a little bit because glass is expensive. But we want to put in good-sized windows that are open, that can be open, so in the proper time we can have a nice breeze coming off it. Charlie said, "You got it. I'll make sure that we've got it just right." So, okay, this couple builds their house. It's on North Spring Street. It is gorgeous. Next, just about 3 months later, this couple over here buys the lot next door. And they go through the entire journey with Charlie again. They get a little bit of help from Charlie Overman, but basically they've got it ready, the rendering is done, the plan is there. And they say, no, wait a minute, Charlie. The way this looks, it looks to us as though our house is going to be exactly the same height as the one next door. Can't we do something about that? Charlie said, "Well, now you're active in the shipping business, and you like to see what's coming in and going on down in the waterfront. Why don't we put a widow's walk on top of your house? That'll give you several feet more than one next door." Just the thing to do. And so indeed, the house was built, the widow's walk was put on, and of course the first couple was a little unhappy with that, but nonetheless there it was. Well, we repeat the same scenario a year later, and the third lot down the street is purchased, and they go through the same thing, and this couple, of course, said, "Well, this is very nice, but that widow's walk is very nice. But can't we do something, get us up just a little higher than this one?" Said, "Well, we might put a cupola on that, and with a roof on it, fine." So this stretches the point a little bit, but basically this sort of scenario went forward. Well, first of all, with the getting of the magazines and the ideas, and so that by the time we get into the first couple of years of this kind of construction on North Hill, this sort of thing is playing out. And basically, the things that were the stylings that they were copying from the north, basically were the Queen Anne, which many of you, of course, enjoy today. The Tudor style with black and white timbers and so forth, that was another one. Italian villa, that comes along also. This sort of thing is one after the other, in one version or another, they come forward, and these houses are built. Now, We're talking now about 1879, 1880, into the early part of the 1880s. You have to stop and think a little bit about what you are building and what you are going to enjoy. When you build your house, we'll have your house up. When you built your house, very nice, beautiful. And beautiful siding from lumbering out from mills right near here, the wood trim on the outside, the decorative trim, the balusters, the balustrades, all the things that give that little extra look on the outside. That all is being manufactured right here in the area because little plants have been opened, particularly over at Milton and Baghdad, that are producing this. It's easily done, easily accessible, and inexpensive. Now, you move into your house. One thing that you have to have done right off the bat, before you move in, is that you have to go to John Brown downtown and make sure that John has you on his schedule to dig a well. You've got to put that well in the ground so that inside your house you've got a nice new hand pump that will bring water right into your kitchen. And you've got another pump usually on the outside to take care of the things on the exterior. That's one. Secondly, you also have to make provision right outside the back door, curtained off if possible, of a private. Now that people change the wording around the pronunciation a little bit, but that later becomes a privy. And every house built in North Hill in the period we're talking about was equipped just exactly that way. Some of you would be concerned also about how warm it might get in the summertime. So you Charlie built another little building right outside the back door. This is going to be called your summer kitchen. So that basically when the summertime comes and the heat is high, you can do your cooking outside, and that was the next thing that you do. Okay, you got to remember now, as you buy this house up on North Hill, it is where it is today. And remember that the business community for the city was basically located from Garden Street south. And that's a nice walk from downtown. So basically you buy your house, you get yourself some good walking shoes, and maybe, if you're one of the unusual families there, maybe you will invest that extra money that you've been making in putting a little stable in the back so that you can have a house, and you'll go down on Garden on Palafox Street to the Hilliard and Harvey carriage house, because this is now where they are manufacturing buggies, wagons, and all the little things that you can pull with a horse. Well, maybe you'll do that. Very few did, because I can look around at this group this evening and see all the men here are strong and virile and so forth. But taking care of a horse and hitching it up to take you downtown in the morning is not exactly like getting out and getting in your Chevrolet and pushing a button. It's a little different. They were available, and a few did it, but not too many. So basically, you do not have running water. You do not have an inside bathroom. And of course, to this point, now we're talking about 1870, 81, 82. At this point, we are just 1 year from the opening of the Pensacola Gas Company. Now, at that point, this company opened its facilities right on the waterfront, and they burned coke to create what they call manufactured gas. And by the time we get into the middle of that decade, 1885, this company struggled at first, but the first big customer they had was the city of Pensacola, and the gas was sold to them to light, to illuminate street lights, so that people going to the new opera house would not be stumbling around in the dark after the show. So that gas was begun. All right, now, I want to take just a second now to show you how happenings in 1 year can make a difference. One of our table mates tonight was talking about the changing in the manufacturing process and how one little thing can make a tremendous change. Well, get this straight now. Up to 1884, we had 4 different groups of men who were volunteer fire departments. And they did their best they could. Each one had its own engine. The water supply for fighting fires downtown was in two parts. One, large barrels filled with water that the city maintained, and then they put little ditches on each side of the major streets downtown and kept them, in the summertime in particular, kept the ditches full of water. You can tell what that did to mosquitoes and that was the water supply for firefighting, so that by the time you get to the mid-1880s, we were having fires, terrible fires, all the time. Insurance rates were going like this. And at that point, a man by the name of B.R. Pitt, you know where Pitt Slip is downtown? Oh, that's the same guy. B.R. Pitt put together a combination of people who were interested in having this problem solved. And they privately put together the money to create a water system. Now, bear in mind, when they started, the whole intent was to put the water system in the downtown area and feed 100 fire hydrants. There was no thought originally of piping into stores or businesses or residences. But as soon as the water was there, of course, people said, well, we want that. And within a year, they were now feeding water into the private residences on the lower part of the city, and then it quickly, of course, is going to get up to North Hill as well. Now, if you put water inside a building, a residence, some of it's going to come out in a form that is not particularly appetizing. So the city very wisely said, well, we got to do something about that. And they did. They began to put piping in the ground to connect with the houses and the businesses. They connected those smaller pipes to larger pipes and sent two separate lines, one along 9th Avenue, the other along Ruth Street, straight down to the bay, where the collected material went straight into the bay with absolutely no treatment. Now, none of you here are old enough to be in this group, but there used to be people around here that would say how they remembered their boyhood or girlhood swimming in the crystal clear waters of Pensacola Bay. The only sidelight I want to have you remember is that the situation I just described was not changed until 1935, when Uncle Sam provided some WPA money to put in the first primary sewage treatment that the city ever had. So you just kind of have to use your imagination on how things work. Okay, we got water, we've got a sewer line. Now, at exactly the same time, a man by the name of Conrad Kuprian was working around here. He had come to this city to work for one of the bigger companies and had been sent up to St. Louis to do some extra training. He was an accountant. And when he got off the train in St. Louis and walked out of the station, he saw something he'd never seen before. There was what they call, in St. Louis, they called an omnibus. It was a trolley being pulled by horses. And Kuprian said, we need that in Pensacola, particularly up there on North Hill. He came back, got two partners, got some financing, got a franchise agreement from the city, and so by the end of 1885, the same time we're talking about with the water and the sewer, we now have the first element of the streetcar system going as far north as would help people here. Now, you say, well, so what? Just think of what it was like. If you're going to do the weekly shop, the daily shopping, what it might have been back in those days. You're living where you do in North Hill. Remember where the grocery stores are. They're down on Palafox Street or Garden Street. That's a long walk. But now the streetcar comes, and you can now have a lift to that. And it's also true for you going to work in the morning. You now have a way to go if you want to. A lot of men walk, but that's the way. So now you've got water. You've got a sewer system, you've got streetcars, you've got the manufactured gas, and within that same year, in late 1885, the company opens up here, the Bell Telephone Company of Florida opens, and now you can plug in and get a telephone in your house, something you have never seen or had before. Now, think of A went B and B went to C, and 1 year after that, the Pensacola Electric Company opened with a generating plant down on the waterfront, so that by the late part of 1887, electricity was now being piped into the downtown area, and it was available up in your area by, probably within a year and a half to 2 years. Now, I've been in a number of the wonderful restored homes that you have up there, and a couple of them that I visited had either the original gas line with the pipe still not tacked onto the wall, so it was still where it was originally, or you got the opposite for the electric line that came in there at the same time. So you see, that particular period, 4 to 5 years, was beginning to make a tremendous difference in what you had. And so the design of houses that you see in North Hill were being affected by that one particular period. So by the time we get into the next decade, we're into the 1890s now, this whole town has begun to change. Because bear in mind, it was only a few years before that, 1876, that we had, our city had its first bank. First bank. We didn't, nobody, I mean, as I remember, you had something under the bed there that you were rolling out. But by the time we get into the 1890s, now the business of finance is growing, and what you now see is a second part of finance. Today we don't think about this too much because there's so many options. But when we talk about building a new house, whether that's downtown or in North, it doesn't make any difference. You had to find your finance